Part 4 of The Reader. That evening, after completing the various chores of life, Ellery pulled open the drawer of her dresser where her silk and satin panties and lace bras were kept. She swept the garments to the side to reveal a stash of garters and wadded-up stockings that had not had the pleasure of her thighs and waist for some time, those frivolities having laid dormant due to the departure of physical romance from her life. She playfully sorted through the various items, pursing her lips with decision, collecting them into matched pairings of stockings, garter, and bra. It tickled her that she was doing this for the indulgences asked of her by the admiring man. Lying in bed that night, reading in the soft light from the lamp on the nightstand, Ellery was finding it difficult to concentrate. She was feeling a bit amorous. The new duties as a reader in the nude were creating inherently powerful, if somewhat delayed, arousal. To have been twice now bared before the man as she read, his eyes devouring every inch of her nakedness, and her, immaculately vulnerable before him, was inviting a pleasant anxiousness to her being. Folding away her book and turning out the light, Ellery sank into the bedding. She listened to the soft cooing of the pigeons that nested on the sill just outside her window. Her hands went beneath the covers, fingertips trespassing her warm skin to arrive between her legs. She quickly revisited the sensations roused earlier in the presence of the man, her tongue moistening the edges of her mouth as her fingers pressed apart the lovely lips of her vagina, instantly sticky with wetness, finding their way inside to fondle the fleshy walls of her womanhood. The initial delicate explorations turned to gentle stroking and small, circular rotations of varying degrees of pressure against her clitoris, the faint teasing of touch progressing into deep plunges, taking her to the tantalizingly elusive brink of satisfaction. When at last it came, in that wonderful abandonment of self-control, when the natural impulses of the body take over and the climb to orgasm becomes inevitable, there was that accompanying unleashing of total primal immersion and unrestricted convulsions. The orgasm broke, resonating through her like an electrical current of rapidly reversing polarity in a wonderfully mad tingling of the senses. The climax passed over her like a small, warm, and crystalline wave in the shallow depths of shoreline on some far-off South Sea island. As the orgasm passed, it left delicious ripples of sensation that coursed her entire body with gradually diminishing tremors. Her body sank into the indentions of the mattress, her breathing slowly returning to normal. After the wave of pleasure had passed, it gave way to a kind of confusing sadness. Ellery grabbed her pillow from under her head and wrapped her arms around it, desperately in want of arms to be engulfing her. And with this pathetic, stuffed replacement for the living being she wanted, Ellery cried herself to sleep, exhausted as much from the shudders of a powerful orgasm as that of emotional longing. Friday. The third visit to the house on the edge of the city. The car, her coach, had delivered the concubine once again to the castle. The man had welcomed her in, and she had proceeded to the reading room, their little haven segregated from the worrying troubles and the empty, vulgar lusts that permeated the world outside. Today, as he sat, awaiting the show to begin, she took extra care in removing her blouse, teasing the ritual unbuttoning with slow deliberation, each maneuver of fingers pressing the little white buttons to their respective holes with agonizingly wonderful slowness. After she unfastened and unzipped her skirt, she carefully slid it down over her waist, revealing a black lace garter belt. Continuing the deliciously slow progress, she eased the skirt down over her thighs to reveal the thin black straps of the garter and sheer stockings. She wore no underwear, the garter and straps framing her fastidiously trimmed pubic hair. His response was subtle, raising his chin slightly in salutation, affirming his pleasure at her careful study and delivery of his want. After properly laying the skirt and blouse and bra across the arm of the couch to keep them from wrinkling, Ellery settled onto the bentwood throne of her domain. She took the novel from the table, and after crossing her legs just so, carefully placed it in the lovely crevice that held her womanliness. With a push of finger to set her glasses back on her nose, she found where she had left off previously and began again the reading. Her sensual voice flowed the words into the admiring man's ears like wine, his eyes wandering the beautifully smooth canvas of her body. Ellery enjoyed the sensations that were ebbing up through her at the thought of his eyes on her. As the session went on, Ellery turning the pages with eagerness in the progress of the story, the man enjoying her voice and her youthful presence, she began to wonder about him. Without revealing any wavering of concentration in her reading, Ellery wondered if all this was a replacement for an inability to achieve an erection. After all, he was old. Perhaps he no longer had the ability, and sufficed his sensual needs by this simple act of watching her read to him in the wonderful nakedness. She considered, a woman doesn't need penetration to achieve pleasure. It arrives in such a vast array of sensual notions. Perhaps the man had discovered this kinky alternative by chance. And who was to say if maybe he wasn't experiencing a truer, more moving intercourse through the nude reading than that of the more often than not simplistic and animalistic act of penetration. As she continued her loquacious activity, turning the pages with a deliberation to match the cadence of her virile rhythms, Ellery began to wonder about other women who had read for him. She took a zealous pride that her delivery was not to be outdone, and fancied herself the best reader he had had, regarding the act of reading with the same value as that of oral copulation. Ellery wanted to believe she was the best. A twinge of jealousy coursed through her in a fleeting moment at the thought that another woman had occupied the bentwood parlor chair. Accompanying this thought was the notion that perhaps he was seeing another reader as well. No, she thought to herself, I am it. Most certainly, I am it. And if there are others, they are being eclipsed in her shadow and will have begun their sad paling in comparison to her brilliant delivery. Ellery's thoughts were intruded upon by the old grandfather clock as it chimed out the end of the session and the end of the week. They would not share the intimacy of the words and the nakedness until Monday. For the time being she felt cleansed, as if bathed in the purity of his simple desires. As she dressed and brought herself back to being fully clothed, he drew back the curtains, flooding the room with afternoon light and bringing the room back to a kind of normality, spilling the erasing light in to vanquish the dark environs of their precious secret. He then turned to her and asked, as one might a passing acquaintance, "Would you like a brandy?" They sat on the leather couch, laughing and regaling various stories and remembrances of life. An hour passed, with no concern for the running tab of the town car, dutifully waiting outside. During the exchange she learned that he had been married, and that his wife had passed away some 10 years ago. There was a daughter, about Ellery's age, who was a lawyer in Boston. Other than that, she learned little, except that he had amassed his wealth in business, he said, bore wealth, but little in the way of genuine reward. As she sipped timidly at her brandy, the man drew an envelope from the desk and handed it to her. She discreetly slid it into her purse. The weight of the envelope didn't cause any suspicions. He seemed surprised that she didn't open it and count it. For the next 15 minutes, as if quieted by the shared gratification of the reading, they sipped their brandies without words, only the ticking of the old grandfather clock filling the space. She stole looks at him, admiring the face that was growing more handsome and refined the more she looked at it, the more she listened to him. As the Lincoln cruised her home in luxury, Ellery drew the envelope from her purse. Only now did she register the slight heft to it. She opened it to see a neat stack of crisp $100 bills. She fanned through them, realizing there was a great deal more than what she was expecting. She counted them. 10 $100 bills. $1,000. $1,000 to sit naked before a man she found quite attractive and read Herman Melville. That's end of part 4.